Hello, everybody. Welcome to Human Caring. Today, me and Per Lindroth here talking, exchanging, and really, as far as we both concerned, are really interested in diving into the nervous system, Polyvagal Theory, such a huge subject that really, I think, important for human lives and the way we deal with various subjects from trauma to for challenges we meet in our life. So hello, Per.
Hello, Shlomy.
Yeah, I don't know exactly. Maybe we should start kind of an opening question, and then we'll see where it's going to take us. So for me, the nervous system and the brain cannot be out of a context. To understand the role of it cannot be out of the context of a structure of a human being, of thoughts and feeling and relationship with the world around. So maybe we can start with that of structure of a human being. What would you say?
Wow. Yeah. Well, one of the things in this that fascinates me is as you mentioned, the polyvagal theory, the autonomic nervous system. Maybe because it's autonomic, so it's beyond our control, isn't it? So it's obviously not anything that we on a daily basis put our attention on, because it's just there, it's sort of working. And then obviously when we might get an interest in it is when it's not working properly. When it starts getting, as we say, dysfunctional. And so that's where my interest really starts. I understand the whole structure you're talking about, and obviously we maybe have to talk a little bit about the polyvagal theory, because otherwise it's just a word, and what is it actually? So we have to remember that, Shlomy.
Yeah.
And we have to talk about that. But so yes, it is true, it's all related. So where to start? But for me, at least, also as a body therapist, I often, if not every time, starts talking a little bit about my interest, or the interesting thing in approaching it from the autonomic nervous system's point of view, because very often ailments, pains have a connection to that and might even stem from there. So, and I always find that actually the clients, it makes totally sense. And if not anything else, then you establish a good relationship by being able to explain a bit what you're doing. Yeah, because of course the autonomic nervous system is related with the hormones, it's related with the immune system, it's related, and as it's related to all the organs, it is related to how we perceive things, how we see things, how we communicate. It's obviously has a major effect on even how we formulate things, how we think, how we live our lives. It's not the only thing, but it has a massive impact on it. So yeah, I don't know where we should start, Shlomy.
No, I think it's a good way to start, because as I hear you describing, when you relate to clients that coming to your door, to your clinic, the importance that you see in front of yourself of bringing the nervous system into the play of the interaction. I think it's so important, and in a way I can relate to it from my own practice with my own people that came to my clinic at work, because first of all, we lack a huge chunk of information about ourselves. and this lack of chunk of information kind of are helping to have misconceptions about how are we doing and why we're experiencing the thing. So I feel what in the medical term it will call education, like psychoeducation, just a conversation of bringing into the knowledge of the person you're talking with what is the nervous system and how huge part it plays in the perception of the experience is a beginning. And I find that actually a lot of the time that could be a help for people to understand themselves better. First of all, to understand, this is what's happening in my body when I'm afraid. And second of all, a huge help that can come out of that is to realize that they weren't in charge of it. They couldn't choose to do something otherwise. And when we talk about, I mean, many of my clients or patients at the time was trauma. So one of the big things that comes with trauma is the activation of the major feelings of shame, of guilt, of I should have done things differently. So already there in the level of helping people understand that basically we're animals and we're designed to, I mean, big portions of us is designed to survive, and this is how it works. Yeah. So this communication is very important as to establish a base, theoretically. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, no, quite very much. I do, yes, and that seen from that perspective, that the way it works, it's about safety, isn't it? It's about protecting us, and it is a system that is, no matter, even when it's dysfunctional, is really doing a great job. I think that's really important. And then of course you can then start focusing on what makes it dysfunctional then, because that is often the cause of the pain, right? People come to you because they have a kind of a pain. It can be a physical pain, but it can also be an emotional thing, right? And it can express itself, in ways you wouldn't call pain, but a depression or anxiety. But I would say, yeah, it is different kinds of pains expressing themselves differently. And yeah, so the whole concept of that this is a system that's trying to keep us safe and is responding on that. I think that's something we can all relate to. The thing of going into the sympathetic fight or flight. Everyone knows that expression in English, the fight or flight mode.
And I think also it's to approach the nervous system in that kind of knowledge about ourselves as human beings is in a way to normalize what we experience, because many people, when they sit alone with their own story, with their own narrative of their experience, feel kind of cut off from others and have an idea that others experience things differently. So I feel that the importance of helping us understand that we are part of nature, and nature have a different laws or mechanism that it works, which also apply us, is already a beginning of kind of, okay, I have my story, my narrative. It's okay, I'm part of something, and let's together study what I'm part of. When you talk about, it's a mechanism. I mean, we are all, any living creature in a way, have a will to live, a surviving impulse in us. That's one thing. The other thing is a production. In a way, we are made to survive and to reproduce, right? And the nervous system is a major actor in that process in us.
Yeah, I mean, if it's just take very shortly, then it is interesting, and I suppose people look differently at it. But I agree with you that yes, we have part of us, a nature of us, which is an animal nature. Then we might have another part, which we sort of call a spiritual part, or at least something spirit on. And so we have these two things in us, and what we know is it's obviously, if something is dysfunctional, it'll affect how we experience life. So they are linked, of course. They're deeply linked, but the theme of our talk is a bit maybe what we call the animal nature, the autonomic nervous system is definitely belonging to that, and there's a lot of instinctive things that's going on, and there's a lot we should not mingle with, because there's a kind of an intelligence at work which is quite amazing. Just imagine the digestion, the heart rate, and these small nuances which is related to how all the organs are working, how the autonomic nervous system is working. You can see it in the heartbeat, how we breathe. And because how we breathe, then what is our emotions? It's so intricately linked. And then you can see it on muscles, you can see it on the face of people, you can see it on the glow of the skin, you can see it on the eyes, you can hear it in the voice. I mean, people who are really, sort of trained can even hear where is a dysfunctionality just on the voice. And when you start getting sensitive to that, you get so much information, don't you? And I would claim that we all get that information. We all know so much more than we are remotely aware of, because our apparatus, our body, our feelings are so receptive. Our mind is intensely slow to understand it, but that's a little bit what we're talking about, isn't it? We're trying to understand what our nervous system, what our body, and what our feelings is telling us. And one of the means of communication is pain, or when we feel really bad, or so how do we interpret that, and what is our tools to receive that information and understand it and process it and hopefully help each other. That's where my interest is, and that's where this is really interesting. What is the experience? And certainly also in my case, my own experience, or suddenly having this experience of understanding something deeply of my own trauma that I'm carrying, and seeing the effect it has almost immediately. In this case of some psoriasis I developed, suddenly got 8 years ago, and when I suddenly had this experience, almost like a lighting of, oh my God, this is what's going on. Because for some years now, I've been in a quite stressful situation, but with specifically one person who was deeply relating to me building a home. It's been so frustrating. And then suddenly I could see how it triggered on a trauma I got when I was 6 months old. And almost immediately, I would say 80% of my psoriasis just was gone. So that's made me very interested in this, and I've experienced it with my clients also, these moments of suddenly realizing what's going on, what it is, and that autonomously, unconsciously is going on, and is, having such sometimes really destructive effect on my life.
I think I feel I have a need to put some stuff in order, kind of to see clearly what we're talking about, because you're talking about two very important things the way I see it. The one thing is, usually, people say trauma, maybe they have idea in their mind that we're talking about one episode, very, very drastic, very dramatic. It could be a car accident, or it could be a soldier at war, that overwhelm the entire organism and kind of retune our nervous system and our perception of what is safe and not safe. So that's what the literature will call the big trauma with a capital T. And then there is another kind of understanding that we've been formed through our life of what is safe and what is not safe. Both are the impressions that come through our body and the impression of thoughts and emotions that connected to him with the surrounding, and slowly they built through the relation. Have we been met? And when we were babies, have we been neglected? Some call it emotional trauma. That kind of slowly, subtle layer through our life, then, which I think we all experience, you know, a trauma of being met toward, sometimes we weren't met. Sometimes we felt unsafe and we felt stuck a little bit in it. And so I think that what you bringing is both the understanding that we talked about the animal part. It's like, this is the form. We're being formed by life in a certain structure that nature kind of put us in. And this is how we kind of create the experience, how it become our story, how we see things. And another important subject you touch on, as I understand it, and I remember our common friend Søren Christensen told me once, you know, symptoms are already a part of a healing. They're telling us something. And somehow we got used to see symptoms as a problem we need to kind of solve. Well, what you're telling is a certain thing, the connection, like slowly put things together to see, oh, actually, you know, this is triggering something in me, which I can see as a symptom, but it's actually telling me something, and seeing it actually go beyond the symptoms to the cause. Is that right? Correct? Understood?
Absolutely. That's how I would put it, quite like that. Yes. This is of course about going to the cause of things, right? How to put it? So yes, when I use the word trauma, I use it in a very broad sense. And as you say, yes, it can be that out of the blue, your secure car is hit from behind, you know, a whiplash. Yes, there's a physical thing to it, but what is, you know, where people is really suffering, it's obviously the shock that you were safe, and then suddenly, and that means from after that, you could, you know, whenever you get in a situation where you think you're safe, you get scared, you know, because it's autonomic, you know, and all that. And that's the thing that that will cause you extremely, you know, pain, maybe the rest of your life. I also use it, yes, in emotional abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse. I have all those as clients, you know, being beaten, unsafe environment in childhood. It can be, you know, parents, can even be siblings, can be in the school. It can be, you know, many have these experiences, you know, their best friends suddenly, you know, make things that are horrible. And, you know, so your whole safe net, you know, safety is suddenly taken away from you. A lot of that happens in the puberty. It's, you know, a lot of things are you know, that's when you start getting migraine, especially the girls. Why is that? So there's a lot of these things which makes the autonomic nervous dysfunctional, so that it suddenly starts saying there's a danger where we would say there's not a danger. And we are not trained, and it's really difficult to see the signs of it. We can get better at it, and that's pretty much what I was referring to with my own story. I was blind to what was going on, and when I suddenly realized that it was all about home and safety, and which I didn't have, and all that, then I could suddenly see what was going on in a way that has helped me. I'm certainly not cured, but it's helped me and a lot, and made me curious. And actually now, you know, it's all about how you then relate to it, and how you then start noticing things with yourself, you know, like how, oh, suddenly I'm breathing differently, I get tense, my solar plexus is tense, or other symptoms like my digesting is not quite working, you know, I can't really digest the impressions I'm getting. It's not only about the food I eat, it's of course about also even digesting the environment that some of my system might interpret as being dangerous, and even about digesting a trauma, which it's undigested. It's in my system. It is blocking my whole system and makes me dysfunctional. So a lot of what we're trying, seen in that light, is of course to try to find how can we relate differently, or start relating to that trauma which is sitting there, causing pain, suffering. That's my interest. That is really, and that's where I feel the Polyvagal theory in many aspects is a great help, because the way it looks at the division of the autonomic nervous system, and for me has opened this interest to the dysfunctionality of it.
I think it's as you said, the polyvagal theory is so important, because you cannot relate to something if you do not have a contact with it. So at the beginning of the relationship is to begin to see that you can relate to something, and the polyvagal is actually putting some words and putting some hardcore science in order to understand what can I relate to, and I think that's a huge help, and that's one thing. The other thing is that it helps us to understand more the whole movement that comes from the East or other tradition that works about different ways to relate to something, and to understand that this new relationship to it is not about changing it, but it will bring a different quality that help it understand it, accept it, and by doing that, then there is a proper relationship that kind of dissolves something that is very stuck, that is very, we've been in the darkness without being seen, without being recognized the function of it, and suddenly you see it, and this light of seeing it, kind of, it's like light to flowers, it's give it some growth in order for in a way physically to change the state of the nervous system. So I think the polyvagal theory it's a huge help. It's a huge help to see what we're talking about, actually. Right?
Maybe we need just to say a few words about it. If anybody is listening who does not know what we're talking about.
Yeah, so how do you understand polyvagal theory? What is it for you?
I don't know if I can claim I understand it, but what I feel helpful is that he divides the nervous system into three, where we are used to and brought up with it being two: the sympathetic and the parasympathetic system, the fight or flight mode, and the rest and digest, and that they're antagonistic. So, and he says, hey, wait a minute, it's actually the parasympathetic actually has two branches to it, right? That it starts from different parts of our mind, one from the brainstem, backside of the brainstem, and another from the fourth ventricle. So actually, you can't say it's just one. There are two there, and that means we have three all in all, and also that they, in terms of the evolution, so we have the most primitive, which is the back part of the parasympathetic, and he calls it dorsal part. Don't know how, but the back part, right? And then we have the next thing in the evolutionary is the sympathetic, the fight or flight thing. And then the most recent is what we share with the mammals, which is the front part of the parasympathetic. So we have three, and that always is a major different from having two that is fighting with themselves, right? And which is maybe saying something about our attitude if we think there's two. But three is amazing, and also that they are all about the safety thing. So we all know, I think, the fight or flight, right? Which comes really strongly, and the thing we maybe not so used to look at is what he's called the dorsal, the most primitive part we have, which is when we shut down or withdraw from things, right? And the popular thing which is taken is a mouse that freezes in front of the cat. Just goes, this is the end. this is the ultimate thread of our life, then we go into that part. But it's maybe also true to say that the way we can experience is when, you know, we get lethargic, we get depressed. Maybe one of the ultimate thing is that we start having suicidal thoughts. We are actually disassociating from life, and that's, you know, that is difficult to understand, which can come from, for instance, you know, you had a major traumatic experience, and your nervous system says you are in danger of losing your life, and then it goes over there. But I think it is fair to say that it can also come from being too long in the fight or flight mode. We simply cannot do that too long. You know, we just too tense, too long, and then suddenly the body just says, and we disassociate. So it's very often that people are what we call stressed, have been stressed for too long, suddenly become depressed. Can't find the energy to do what they did before, all that kind of stuff. So that's very interesting to see just that from the autonomic nervous system and the polyvagal aspect of it. And then there's, of course, what we share with the mammals, and you know that there you're dependent, you have to relate, right? So there's a much more relational part of us, and you know, we relate to other people. You know, a mammal wouldn't survive a sec if it was not, you know, unlike a baby. You know, it just gets all our attention with a few tricks. But that's, of course, very much what, you know, a deep part of being as we are human. So, and I think the way that many therapists are working within this is that the first step for, one can say, the healing power that we have inherent in us is to bring the client, or help to bring the client from, which is very often coming in either fight or flight mode and all the symptoms that goes with that, or in, you know, the withdrawal dorsal, to get the client over and feel safe, and, you know, relax, the trust, the mutual trust, and all that, because then we can start, as you said, relating to it. All that is very much about relation, and that means also, you know, an inner relation, my relation to myself. And to my pain, as you say. Yes, I think we basically brought up to, oh, take a pill, or at least also hope, oh, we can find the right pill, or the right GP who can tell us the right pill, so we can get rid of that, whatever is bothering us. But there's something immensely precious, of course, in going into a relationship, because you're going into a relation to yourself, and there might be some sources actually there that you, at the end of the travel, the journey, would be immensely happy for having discovered, or rather maybe rediscovered. It might be buried under something, you know, that you actually, the gold under the dragon, you know, kind of things. You know, there's something you don't want to touch with, but if you go into a relation to it, you might rediscover something that is so precious of yourself.
I think it's you know, the more we talk about it, and the more I'm reflecting about it, there is so many implications of what this theory can help us in our own process of studying ourselves, and what help is, and because, you know, for me, for example, the whole understanding that we have the capacity to be in movement, kind of when it's necessary. There is something in me by nature that will respond to the situation. If it's under attack, then it will do what it needs to do, and it first of all, it's capable of doing stuff that I cannot imagine. I mean, it's amazing organism, and that we kind of designed to have a free flow, but somehow along the way we get stuck, and it seems like there is no movement. It's like we don't see every new moment as a new situation. There is a certain continuity that we kind of dragging something that is not there to something that is here. And that's very interesting. And it's also a key, I think, again, how the body-mind intervention bring more and more to be present into the moment. What's actually physiological mean is to be able to see how this situation composes me right now, and how much in order to do that, it's in the body. I must be able to see that I'm not in the body, I'm captured, I'm hypnotized to something that not belong to it. It came automatically because this associate with something I know. So I'm not really in touch with the actual situation. And that's a very beautiful way to help us understand why it's all this, because it could be a cliche in New Age, be in the moment. What does that mean, unless I'm in the body? That's one thing. And then we can start to talk about what dysfunction is, which is actually not a dysfunction. It's just the way it seems like there is dangerous. If something don't go get the possibility to move with what's going on, then it's stuck. And it could be, like you said, in over tension or under tension. And sometimes it will be for a long time in over tension, and then it collapses to under tension. And as a body therapist, it's very interesting to see it actually in the muscular tonus, that there is something that is very hard, very firm, very ready. And then there is something that is kind of slugged, kind of lack of energy in it. And to, as a therapist, to understand that and to sense it through your own fingers is really information for you to know what's going on inside. Kind of what is necessary. Is it need to relax when actually it's to relax, or is it need to come, you know what I mean? And that's very huge help, I think, Polyvagal brings. Another thing is the understanding that we can help each other, we can regulate each other. In order to learn slowly, how can I take responsibility on my own system? As you said, through relationship, we actually can help each other to change its platform and the physiological platform. Because if I'm being met very clearly with the eyes, with the muscles in the face, with the tonation, I get signals from another person, that's okay, I'm safe. So somehow my body will communicate with it. And already there we are more receptive. Something is more fertile there to continue to the next movement, and then to learn how to relate with myself. Makes sense? I mean, there are so many other ways, but those two are very
I think that is really important. I mean, if you come into a room, and there's a very tense person there, you tense. Your breathing changes, whether you want it or not. And of course, you can become so conscious about it that you can maybe do something about it, but it does. And and if you live with with a person who is very stressed and all that, you are affected by it. Or if just being with a friend, and that friend suddenly goes on and it is on the mobile all the time, and in that world, your relationship changes. The tensions in the muscle changes. Yeah, the breathing, everything. And I think we don't realize that to the extreme degree that our body is receptive and will receive that impression. And as you say, the opposite is also true, of course. If you come into a room where there is a really relaxed atmosphere and you're a bit stressed, you immediately experience that. And oh my God, this is how nice and relaxed it is to be in this family, and another family where you say, I'm afraid of touching anything here, because if and all that it's all there. And it affects us, everything, how we think, how we, and just repeating. And of course, in the situation we're talking about a therapist, I agree completely. However, you see there's a trap here, because you can learn all those things. in your education, you're teaching as a therapist. Oh, I have to talk, with a very relaxed voice, and I have to make sure that I'm relaxed in my muscles and all that. And any client, maybe unconsciously for most of us, will pick up on that immediately. What a lie. And it's going to be difficult to establish a true relationship, because our instincts are amazing. The problem is we don't have much connection with our instincts, but they're there and they're working. You can't lie. You have to be honest towards yourself. The more honest you are towards yourself, the better the relation. You don't have to word it all, but something start, as you said, something in me will also, if I come and I'm actually too tense. I've just had this experience, and with this relation, but the honesty towards that is already the beginning of a change, and you have to start from where you are. You can't start from where you want to be. You have to.
I think what you're saying is so important, because you cannot fake authenticity. And this is why it's one thing to study this theory, Polyvagal theory, as a theory. It's another thing, like psychology and anatomy or whatever, every kind of a field of studying have it's only knowledge unless it's become understanding, if it's involved a practical, how should I put the word, your own observation, your own real study with yourself to see it live happening. And I think that it's this is the indirect kind of work with another person of saying, you know what, we're in the same boat, is that you yourself recognize right now something is activated in me. The more you're authentic with your own understanding and your own touch and be able to put it into words, then you not just say, you know what, everybody is the same. You actually right now sharing an experience that the other person can say, wow, how do you know me so well? Well, it's not you, it's me, but I know how it feels. And this is bringing people together, because suddenly we are not a therapist and a client. Somebody needs help and somebody is expert. Right now we are two human beings that really explore ourselves and curious and honest about seeing what is. And that means to be also vulnerable, because it means that you get away from this position that you start with, and like you said, we get it. If we want or not, instinctively we know if somebody is playing or is it authentic, and I think this is so important for anybody that works with other people to study himself really thoroughly, because this is it's a foundation, right?
Absolutely, and there's a lot between the lines of what you're saying, and between us when we relate that is beyond what we are conscious about. So what you're saying is the top of the iceberg, because we are really relating much more than we think. Just we're in the same room, and if we start talking, or not just talking but relating, as you say, the amount of material that's exchanged between us, vibrating between us, of course, how would I know? But that is my conviction, and I would say my experience. And what we're talking about is something that's vibrating, all the way down on a cellular level. If that kind of change you're talking about, which is, call it awareness, or you're more sensitized, or you are more, something that it's obvious that if something is tense, it can't vibrate. And if it starts, relaxing things, that you start with that movement yourself, but it goes all the way, doesn't it? I mean, all the way it goes. And then we're relating. We sort of maybe we're a little bit, you use the word hypnotized, but maybe we're a little bit sort of, this is me and this is my body and this is where it stops, but if you start going down, then it's space. It's all space. Most of it is space. And the same between you and me, and and in the client and the therapist, there is a communication way beyond the words also, which is really important. And here is, of course, the attitude towards, for instance, coming, now quoting back to Søren Christensen you was talking about, which I agree with, that what's my body trying to tell me, and what is my capacity to listen to it? Because usually I don't, as you say, I just want to get rid of this. And how should I understand pain or suffering? How? Because I'm not used to relate to it. But if for a moment accept that I don't just want to get rid of it, but to listen to it and to be with it. Of course, I don't want, this is not a sadomasochistic thing. I don't want, but I'm afraid of that it'll be more of it if I start relating to it, right? I think that's one of the things. There's a fear there. And obviously it's not quite like that. But if I start sort of listening, which is a big question, what is that then? But it is going into a relation to it. It is with my body actually relating different to it. And there, one of the aspects of this, I feel, for me, is that the listening to the pain takes me to the trauma somehow, which is somehow buried very often. It can be sort of recent thing like a car crash, but if it's one of those that comes from an early age or have been going on for quite a long time, it takes quite a bit of listening, softening, being with. And that's where my interest, at least as a therapist, and I think generally can be an interest, is how can I, maybe not directly address the pain, but indirectly or sometimes directly, actually approach with this attitude we're sharing now, listening with all of my body, both the client and the therapist, and address this. And sometimes words are very, very helpful, of course, and if one gets into that deeper relation, I experience at least that the client sort of sink into herself or himself. It is as if they're falling into the body. This is things start relaxing, the breathing change, and of course you can see a lot in the breathing, also where they are in the autonomic nervous system. But now we even maybe going, and it's obviously maybe in the beginning of a treatment, things goes on here up in the frontal lobe, and then suddenly it is naturally you fall much deeper into yourself, also in the mind, but also in the body, and you go down. And this is a question I'm really happy to share with you, because there, I think you certainly touch, there certainly starts a communication between what we call something subconsciousness and unconscious, the autonomic, and sometimes, boom, you're informed by something and you understand. You might not really be able to put words on it, but you understand it. You understand it. So this is amazing, because that can come from a different attitude and a different relation to my ailment. And then you can start actually, and it can even be, a person that's triggering a thing, coming back to my own story, and I start, oh my God, I really hate this person. Because that triggers me to go over in my fight or flight mode without me knowing it. But with this attitude, and suddenly, my God, I have a chance actually to see something that's really important for me. I don't know that someday I will go and hug that person. Yeah, I know it, but it's still not quite clear, if you understand what I mean.
I understand. And I think, first of all, for me, the question that comes from when you're sharing it was, what possible change is possible for me, because I think that we kind of try to have a preference of how this moment should be, and slowly, and this is how we see the world. It's kind of a filter. This is what I want, you know, and if we, and the way we experience it, it always seems like it's out there, the reason, but we tend to forget that everything actually going on inside somehow. And I think there is a difference between believing and thinking that the change could be to change the form, like, you know, to say I'm suffering because I have an eye color which is brown, and all my life I saw in Hollywood that everybody has blue eyes, all the good-looking people that have success, and that becomes part of the story, that I'm not as successful because this is who I am, to the extent that I will do a surgery to change the eye color, to be to the extreme. But more and more to begin to see that maybe a certain change is possible with, you call it understanding and seeing it. It's something completely else. It's a game changer, because you can see what is not the problem and what is the problem in a way, and it gives you a different way to see it, and suddenly all the baggage falls. Like what you're carrying, and you think that was my problem. It's out there, but so you begin to see it in yourself, and you see how much you're trying to do the impossible, to change a fact. So it's a lot of the relationship is to see what is fact to some degree, how I'm formed by life. I cannot change my past. I cannot change the way I became with time, but slowly I can see that maybe that doesn't have to define who I am. And this is applied from this kind of relationship. Maybe there is a possibility to see that, you know, yes, that's part of me. And yes, there is more to me that give it a different perspective, then it loses its edge. It doesn't mean that it disappears, but it landing on a different understanding every time it come up, you know. That, does it make sense what I said?
Yeah. Quite. Maybe one of the implications of what you're saying is that the first thing I have to give up is this: what can I achieve? So, you know, because in a way it's rubbish to say, but in a way it is that the usual way that I approach such a question is very often standing in the way of me of maybe truly listening to, because the question behind that is in a way this longing or this search of for myself, because I think we share that, all of us. We all feel that there's something that's essential for us, and we are not very often not in a proper contact with it, or we feel that we could be much more in contact with ourselves. Again, this sort of falling down in ourselves, and that we're running after something. And that does not mean that we don't, in the world we're functioning in, doesn't mean that we can't make, you know, aims and achieve something. But when it comes to ourselves, I think we really have to, as you do, question what are our aims, what is our true aims that are really related to ourselves, and what is aims that are taking us away from ourselves, and maybe because we think we should do things, or we should, you know, we do it to please others, and all the things that we are under the influence of. But really to question ourselves and fall back and have this more inner questioning, which needs space. We need space to ourselves, you know, and that's scary for part of us. That's pretty scary. You know, it's coming back to the other conversation where Lucy was here, but it's the sort of form and something in us that's formless, you know, the in between in us, the space. And I think we're all longing for space, and that is, yeah, related to everything we've talked about. And of course, the trauma is exactly the opposite. You know, it is something that it has become immobile. fixed and full of fear, of course. And we just have to be very gentle and have a caring attitude towards it and ourselves.
I think that's very important. Again, bringing the why Polyvagal is important, and how I see it through the lens of traditions of the past, wisdom of the past, that try to help us see that everything is temporarily, everything is in movement. And somehow it doesn't feel like that in our life, right? When we have a bad mood, when we have a thought or a pain, as you said, it's kind of we getting caught in it, and it can affect us for the rest of the day. I mean, many, when I work with the veterans with PTSD, it's like they had a bad night and then they kind of wake up and they know what the day gonna be. And then, like, I feel that the potential of exactly meeting in the therapeutic room or in any kind of room which is safe, where, okay, so let's see what the facts right now in the body, what's going on in the body. Yes, it's scary a little bit, but by slowly becoming to see the body as itself, and realizing when we're not seeing the body and that's okay, and not to judge that. That's because it's kind of muscles, mental muscles that we never really been trained. It wasn't kind of a big priority for our society to train us to pay attention to the body, right? But we have the potential, and then slowly to see when I'm not paying attention, like a bodily anchor, and how does it feel, what it takes to come back. And slowly, by doing it just for a couple of minutes, as you said, maybe it feels unsafe, so emotions coming up, and then you see how what is the world inside, what is the feeling, emotion, association, and what is sensation. And slowly, just the act of wanting to stay with what is, without agenda, without a goal with it. I have the experience of many times with people that, even though it was kind of unknown and scary, it was a very concrete experience for them to be with themselves in a completely different way. That, wait, what was that? And I had this emotion. Usually it will mean something, and this and that, and it will stand. Now I could be with that, and I could actually see it as a wave coming, where it's moving, and how it leaves me. And it feels actually, first of all, not that dangerous, and second of all, it's a release. Something feels like I'm lighter. And I think it's really, as a tour guide, as a therapist, is both to be able to stand with all of that and to make an effort oneself, and then slowly to help putting words into it and introducing this world is a very important work. And for most people, it's kind of, wow, it's an unknown world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what you're describing is interesting in itself. And then if you look at it, as you say, from the polyvagal, you're describing being in what is called the social engagement part, isn't it? Our mammal part, or how we put it, the more relational part. One could maybe also say, and that's just amazing, isn't it? And of course we can get some tools to help us detect what part we are in, things that we don't want to have anything to do in that respect can also be a help for us. When I start tensing up, then I know, or I stop breathing. Often we don't experience that, but very often we stop breathing in situations, or the shallow breathing, or you can maybe even, these things are difficult, but you can also sometimes hear it on your voice, your pitch goes up and you're a little bit, and so we can help getting some signs on that. But I think what you're saying is really, 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 really important. The thing of allowing to be with it, and of course it is because. So why are we afraid, and why is there immediately something that thinks that this can be dangerous? Because there's a part of our mind that is really quite static and can only think, in either or all the time, like a computer, tick. There are only two possibilities, but I think the thing you're describing of staying with it and how things change without me changing it, but change is suddenly possible because there's a flow coming in, something starts moving, which is how we created, if one can put it like that, is something that one could wish that one would experience so many times that it becomes again a second nature in us, that we instinctively know that this is true. This is a true way to relate, to myself, to others. And often we haven't quite, for some. And the intelligence of being in the moment, I think we underestimate that, because I think we have another measure usually than that, and it is an amazing intelligence, that is a work in us, which we underestimate. I mean, just the intelligence of how our system works, digesting, the whole regulation, the whole homeostasis thing in us. That's an amazing kind of intelligence, isn't it? Work. And if you just stay, then suddenly you start breathing with now in the body, and you can only the body that really can be in the now, the whole thing. And then
it's so interesting what you're saying, because I think we have a challenge in our society where we really have this been taught in the drive to do stuff. And actually what you're applying, what you're saying is that there is an intelligence at work. Life is intelligent at work, and I'm part of it. And something in me is kind of seated in a division. There is limited understanding of it in me, and of myself and life itself. And I feel like I need to interfere and to do stuff so it will fit to the ideas that I have, if it's what is success, what I want to achieve. And if it's biologically kind of to avoid the uncomfort, the unpleasantness, and to put myself in the pleasant, it's kind of very natural, beautiful organism. And that brings me back to what we talked before about this slowly process of understanding what's happening. And it's really demand a big muscles of learning to be with it, and attention and accept and curiosity is something that we can help each other recognize that it's also built in us and can be developed, that slowly bringing this understanding, piece here, piece there, and then at the time it's getting a little bit, like you described, now I can see why things happening to me in that way. And in a way that removes any kind of resistance to the fact. You just see it as it is, and you with it. You can say it could not been otherwise. And I think one of the drive that people have with trauma, with everything, why is it like this? When we begin to see that it is as it is, and it's amazing intelligent, even though it's unpleasant right now, then the resilience and the way we can contain and endure change completely. And something grow in us even more.
The change we are afraid of. We have to, I think we all, even though we wish change, if we have to acknowledge also that there's also a part of us that doesn't want change, and maybe is even afraid of it. So that's why we hold on to something. We don't dare to let go, because we don't know what's going to come. So we hold on to something that, debilitating. I mean, I think we all share that, but it is, the scope of it is amazing. And of course, it's again against how we are made. It is not breathing, it is not flowing, it's cancer. So that's the biggest scope. And you're human caring here. There's something of my attitude towards myself, right? Where I just have to be much more caring in a way, and I think, as you say, I think change can happen quickly. This is basically for life, isn't it? I mean, this we have to be patient and rest with ourselves, and dwell. There's, again, coming back to a space. There is a space for us in ourselves. The true center of ourselves, but we might not quite be there often. Up here. So, and out there running after that head, trying to follow it. Whereas I have a headache. That's the it's amazing. I also want to share something because of this. This about the flow and the vibration. A very strong, simple. Well, maybe I'll just one here. A very close sort of family thing. Who got very, very much pain. This is a person who was in her 80s. In the back, and it was called hairline fractures, things, little fractures in both. And that basically the person wished to find the right TP expert that could tell what to do about it, so that it could get away. But and I did give a few treatments, but they were basically not what I would call a treatment. It was so simple, just actually simple little vibration. We call it pulsation in meditation. Very, very little. Now this person was quite sensitive, so that immediately brought her back to her childhood. It just flooding up with childhood memories, very strong, and it's just very little. So you brought back, and both times 2 days after, no pain. But the pull to get, the advice and the pill was too strong in this. So it's not a good story in that sense, but it's a good story in terms of everything we talked about. Also the Polyvagal Theory, and about vibration, and about how there is my curiosity, I think there's a frequency in us, which is us. There is something, and if you're really listening, prematurely born people who are prematurely born often, also is challenged. Not always, but it's challenged. And if you can sort of, because you're there in that incubator and you don't get, that, and sometimes, at least early on, there's been maybe not this awareness from the nurse that you're making some noise, you're banging your things on the top of the incubator, and that poor children get a lot of impressions. But still there, because it's been in the womb, still there. If you can, you can really listen. Something starts changing because of that memory, which is so deep down. I think. What am I saying? What am I trying to say? I think I'm trying to say that we have that. And we have the experience, we have the knowledge, we have the remembrance in us. Mm-hmm. Everything is possible, I suppose, at least in theory.
I think what you're saying, and coming back to the Polyvagal Theory, people usually say body-mind. It's actually body-mind surrounding. When you cannot separate, because another thing because what you describe again is kind of the relational thing that actually sits in the body, the impression that buried deep in us without, and it's so normal, and we know it's invisible, but it has its effect. It has kind of of something that affect the way we see the world. I know in trauma, there is the whole understanding of the whole concept of secondary trauma, which means that, you know, a person with PTSD affects the relative, if it's the spouse or the children, and they become also developing a certain traumatic episode without being there. And we can understand now much better with the Polyvagal. Well, it could have been otherwise. It's two or a couple of bodies sharing the same room, communicating with each other. It's not something that is conscious. It's just relationship, as we talk, that communicate with each other. Today in science, we can talk about mirror neurons, but somehow we forming each other all the time and regulating. So I slowly become to reflecting more and more of the implication of that. Because when we work with people with trauma, let's say, even if they have amazing therapists that once a week create a safe room that affect their regulating, the rest of the time they're going home. And their spouse, the whole environment in the house is already in flight or fight or freezing. So maybe another way of seeing therapy is to understand that we must work also directly with the relatives. It's the same movement. You work with those, with the victim himself, or the people, the person that have PTSD, or whatever you want to call it, the trauma. You know that it's not only there, it's the relationship that he's spending most of the time. You have to change there in order to help the progress. And that's a huge help, because many families are actually really breaking down because they feel like they don't understand each other. If we talk about veterans that have PTSD after being in war, we hear very often that their families don't recognize it's not the same person. So it seems like they do not understand. But if we help them to understand what's going on and to see what's happening to them afterwards, it will be such a new way and an important way to affect all around problem. Wouldn't you see that?
Yeah, no, I think that's true. It's wow, it opens a lot of questions. Also, there's how we understand each other and why, you know, when, you know, either you get a brain thing or medication, you know, opiates, you know, which is a big thing. It changes the personality and all that. What is it? When do we recognize each other and when don't we? And the whole scary thing about that. Habits coming into that, of course, also. If suddenly the spouse starts behaving differently, you just, it scares the piss out of you, doesn't it? Because, you know, it opens everything. But yes, I'm really with you. And of course, the interesting thing also in that, and in the moment you start just being a bit more attentive, and it's really difficult. We have to acknowledge that this is difficult. But if you start getting more aware of the signals that your body is telling you, of when you're under these impressions that makes you feel this, that, and the other, you know, you're not just taking by an association, say, I want to get rid of it, or the emotional response to it, but actually, hey, wait a minute, what's actually going on here? Why is it actually, oh, it's every time she's, I don't know what, is going out like that, or, you know, so there's sort of so much to learn, and it is difficult because it is still autonomic. It's unconscious, but it does show itself. Well, it does manifest itself, either in the muscular, the breathing, the facial expression, the prosody, the voice, the pain. Why do I suddenly why am I constipated? You know, what is it? Oh, it's every time or, you know, all these signs I think are really helpful, because then you know, okay, something has triggered that I'm going over in the fight or flight here. What is it? What is it? You know, maybe not with that attitude I'm showing now, you know, a gentle, human, caring approach, right? You know, you have to be really patient. And then I think, you know, in terms of what you're saying with the whole family, because that's everything has to sort of, it's cogwheels, isn't it? It's all down, 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 down. And the more we sort of, it's often the one that really triggers you. That's where the key is, and that's the one that the last place you're looking.
And it's trigger you because they're themselves getting triggered. It's like one movement, and that's the thing, and I think it's a big subject because we can elaborate, also intimacy and relationship. There's so much going on that Polyvagal can help us in order to be tuned to what's really the experience that's going on, instead of automatically being in an echo of some narrative and idea, and those kind of really being a good detective in a way of what's going on. It gives a new possibility to understand the situation and actually to be an active player in it. And I think that I would love to explore this subject with you another day, perhaps, because I think we really have, it's so huge in so many ways to go about it, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, what one wish is to go to the cause of the matter, right, somehow, and address that, not just this, that, and the other. Then you help for a few days. It's sort of the human element in it. I think that's my interest. Just to come back to where we started somehow. Mm-hmm. It's interesting to talk like this, to sort of meet oneself, understand one's own understanding and questioning, because understanding must be so deeply related to questioning. It's not having a fixed idea, and it's partly dead or starting in that direction.
And we do need all the help we can get.
Yeah.
We do in different ways. So I hope for anybody that is watching it that it might be a help somehow.
Yeah.
In that direction. For me, at least, I can feel that really, I can see that it's opening different directions, and I see myself and images of myself in situations, connections, that are so important personally for me in my process. So I hope we can do that again.
Yeah. Just one last thing that comes from what you're saying, a kind of humility is called for, isn't it?
Yeah.
Also, as a therapist, whenever you meet, actually.
That's. I think it's connected to the authenticity, because, and it's a fine balance, because I feel that sometimes it's too unsecure. You feel it's like a really a thin balance to know that you don't know, and at the same time that this fire of wanting to learn is what you can bring into the picture.
You don't have to voice it. It's part of your being, your isn't, questioning. Well, thank you.
Per, thank you so much for this conversation. Till next time. Bye-bye. Thank you.